Please welcome Andy Baxter.
So just to let you in on a little secret, I've never done a presentation when there's a green room in the back. I know you're curious. It is not green, but they do have free Coca-Cola products for everybody, and I think that's why the speakers come out so kind of jazzed up at the beginning. So I'm going to have some familiar themes at this stage of the day with some things that you've already heard, but I'm also going to take a slightly different tact around this. I want you to think for a second about when you were first deciding about your first career. Maybe you were in college. For me, it was in my junior year of college, and really thinking about, like, what is it that I wanted to do? I had a good kind of like liberal arts type education, so it seemed like a lot of things were possible. And I had a campus minister who was a mentor of mine. And he gave me this advice that I never, ever stopped thinking about. He said, Andy, like, vocation is the place where our deep gladness meets the world's deep need. It's from a guy, Frederick Buechner. And I thought about that. We all are made incredibly in touch with the deep needs in our region, in our state, and now. From time to time, I go back. I want to share with you some pictures that reinforce for me the deep need. So I live and grew up in the Charlotte area, and the Library of Congress has a number of pictures of children from around that area in the cotton mills and the textile mills that were working. And when you look at these pictures, you think, wow, like, this is, I mean, it's horrible. It's about it, but it's like just a century ago that we saw like this level of need. When I look in the pictures of some of the kids' eyes, and you think about what their prospects were, what their lives were like, it's horrible what they faced. But all along, there have been people who have risen to the occasion, their teachers, whose deep gladness was to work with the children in the deepest need. This is from, I think this was Elizabeth City, this was in the UNC Digital Archives, Elizabeth City, 1899. Think of all of these servants who became teachers, didn't have a lot of whiteboards or smart boards, oftentimes not a PLC to share things with or to talk about it, or it wasn't exactly a What Works clearinghouse to talk about, you know, what the research-based evidence was, but they met the needs of the children, and it's inspiring. I don't have a date for this one, but some of you, maybe, the date on this was circa 1960s, so your guess is mine. I love this one for what it symbolizes. I mean, obviously kind of a staged photo, but what it symbolizes of one teacher lifting up her students. This I wish my teacher knew meme has been around for a couple years. I just caught it this year. But they're powerful if you read through them. Just Google, I wish my teacher knew. I wish my teacher knew that my dad works 2 jobs and I don't see him very much. I wish my teacher knew that I'm smarter than she thinks I am. That one kills me. Study after study. You don't need me. You had Matt. You had Abby, you had Dan, everybody tells you like how important teaching is for people's lives, not just in what they do on a standardized test score in a given year, but actually their outcomes for the rest of their lives. You have all of this, and yet there's this disconnect between the power of the deep gladness meeting the deep need and what you hear from people in education about whether you too should join your deep gladness to that deep need. A young teacher said to me recently, when you read the media coverage and talk to teachers, why would you want to become a teacher? I remember when I'm asking this question from Frederick Buechner in my own life, I talked with my mother some. Now, my mother, lifelong reading teacher, mostly all in North Carolina. And when I told her that I was just considering being a teacher, this was 1992, she screamed, "No, I would never want you to be a teacher. Don't do it. Don't do it." Let me tell you, they treat you so bad. It's this whole kind of litany of stuff. The disconnect for me was that I had seen her eyes many times as she was staying up late to work on a project. She was a reading specialist teacher and trying to get her kids to understand reading in a new way. And I saw the joy when that went well and when she came back. And I thought, why isn't she talking to me about that feeling right now? I don't want to at all minimize the frustrations that many teachers have. I spend a lot of time talking with teachers. And so here, in no particular order of our priority, are a number of the things that teachers tell me that make their lives less than exciting sometimes as a teacher. It's the students, precocious students. This one says, "I may be wrong." He wrote 7 times 5 is 75, but it's how I feel. Or this one, teachers dealing with diverse needs. She says, "I need you to line up by attention span." I frequently turn to The Onion for kind of getting right at the heart of things. Frustrated inner city students are running out of ideas about how to motivate their teachers. "We've tried everything to reach out to our teachers in hopes of making a connection, but it's just so hard to get through to them," said 10th grader Christopher Fenton. He confirmed that most of his instructors live in low-income households and lack the basic language skills to communicate effectively. "It's difficult to walk in the classroom each morning and see them sitting listlessly at their desks, convinced that nothing that they do at the school matters. And unfortunately, it creates a vicious cycle. They think they're going nowhere, and that's how they behave." Or you've got dealing with parents. It's hard to even imagine certain personality types even getting into teaching, right? Like if you just were used to calling it like you see it, you'd have to really work this, you know? Like she really has an interesting choice of behavior in class. You have to deal with people like me, the central office bureaucrats, when I was in Charlotte, who are ready to unlaunch the next new PowerPoint of the new phase, of the new plan, that this is going to change, this is going to be the reform that sticks. You've got to deal with people like in the state boards who are dealing with teacher evaluation. We've got a new way. In this case, under our updated educator evaluation policy, teachers must make an unforgettable lifelong impact on at least 3 of every 10 students and instill a love of learning in them that lasts the rest of their lives, said State Board Chairman James Meeks, adding that based on the annual assessments, if 30% of students don't recall a particular teacher's name when asked to identify the most influential and inspiring person in their lives, that instructor would be promptly dismissed. You deal with principals that oftentimes you are probably smarter than, are going to make decisions that you just can't understand without your input. You're going to deal with class sizes that feel too large, that you haven't been trained to deal with. You're going to deal with constant changes. Lou over here is doing the new ESSA plan for North Carolina. And we know, we've heard all morning about the compensation issues, right? And yet, one of the great collection of facts in your folder in charts, and this one caught my eye. This is teacher turnover and reasons for teacher turnover over time. I am not super familiar with the background of this data, so I'm just going to take this for what it's worth. What was interesting is that the one I circled is the reason that people give. It's dissatisfied with teaching. I want a career change. This is the reason that they gave for leaving. And if I read the media, I would have thought this was the #1 reason that people were leaving. Granted, it's going up a little bit over the years, right? As a percentage of where it started, like in 2009 or so, it's gone up. But is an industry in crisis if less than 1.5% of its total teachers leave because they are frustrated and they want to leave? Everybody's going to have a different answer, but that to me is that's not a crisis. What's going on? Maybe it is the case that, yeah, there are a ton of things that can drive even a saint mad about teaching, but there's something fulfilling about it. There's something that meets the deep calling that people have, a place to use their gifts and their skills and their intellect to do something that you can't find a more rewarding option. I'm recalling, what would civil rights be today? Now, granted, here I am talking from Charlotte, and it's not like we have reached the dream by any means. But what would it have been like if instead of I have a dream, it was I have a nightmare? Would that have called all those people to the Washington Mall? I think about this about maybe 10 years ago. I read an article by two kind of environmentalists who are critiquing the environmentalist movement. And what they said is, we're just approaching all of this the wrong way. People don't want to hear us coming because all we're going to do is talk about cataclysm and doom, etc. We need to give people a vision of something to aspire towards, not just avoiding imminent disaster. Right? So I want to just push us a little bit, and not in an either-or way, but in a kind of both-and way, to push on this narrative of like, teaching's so horrible. Come do it, and try to figure out how to deal with the policy challenges that we have talked about, and at the same time bring to the forefront the incredible, powerful experiences that teachers have of transforming lives. So I'm going to end with 4 questions that I hope, I don't necessarily have answers to these, but maybe that you would discuss this afternoon in the breakout group. The first is, how do we change this kind of Joan of Arc teacher recruitment strategy? Like you can say, well, we're offering signing bonuses, but if the overall narrative is teaching's horrible, come do it. It'll be great. How do you do that? Second, how do we move from this image, and this has come up a number of times beginning with Dan's thing this morning, where teachers don't really feel, I got to be honest with you, a lot of times like cattle. We're herded off to professional development at a central office. Now we're herded this way. We're going to get the brand after our 4th year of being career status. And it just goes, it's just like that. There's no differentiation. There's no sense of that each person matters. How do we go from that to something like this Gallup employee engagement thing? So the Gallup folks do this thing. A lot of you may be familiar with it, but they can predict very, very well the retention of their effective employees based on those employees' answers to about, I think it's 12 or 13 questions. One may have gotten cut off. And the questions, kind of like we heard in the irreplaceables this morning, are not, they're not that hard to do. People who say, I know what's expected of me. I have materials and equipment to do what I need to do. I have an opportunity to do best each day, to do something each day that I do best. I get recognized. I have a supervisor that cares about me. There's someone who encourages my development. My opinions count. I agree with the mission and purpose of the organization. Everybody wants to do a good job. I have a good friend at work. I feel like I'm making progress. It's a place to learn and grow. What would it take to create those conditions in a school? Third, another teacher told me that when she was in college, she was pre-med originally, and was talking about, with her advisor, what she should do. And her advisor, so a professor in the college, said, don't be a teacher, you're wasting your potential. Like, what's sadder to hear than that? I completely know where that guy was coming from, right? Like, he's thinking about all the kind of stuff that we've talked about. But if that's the mindset that our best and brightest are hearing, and I don't think this is uncommon, what do we do about that? And lastly, I think we should keep this kind of image in mind. So as we think about potential things to change, I would say, just as a heuristic, think about whether that thing is a tip of the iceberg type solution, kind of like the 1% solution idea, and nothing wrong with that, like we have to chip away doing things, or if that's kind of at the big root level of what's going on in this. And I would suggest trying to map those. We're going to need, in innovations, we're going to need stuff at the top, but if we don't address kind of some of this lower stuff, I think we'll just be back in another 20 years, and we'll be quoting, as Dan did, we'll quote something from 2016. Oh, people were talking about this back then too. So with that, I want to thank you for the time and the engagement, and I'm going to go see what's in store in the green room next. All right, thank you.